Hello, world history students, and welcome to this screencast on Worlds Apart, Americas and Oceania from Bentley and Ziegler's Chapter 6 and 20, 5th edition. I'll be taking you through the biggest ideas in the Americas section of these two chapters. And this chapter is well titled in terms of how Bentley and Ziegler treat this content. Chapter 6 is way back in the pre classical, earliest time period section, even though the Maya content extends well past 600, the classic age of the Mayas being in like the 7th, 8th, 9th centuries. So I feel like it's been shunted aside a little bit, but it's very important. Plus, there's this handsome llama kicking off chapter 20. It's made out of silver. I love this thing. It might be my favorite illustration in all of Traditions and Encounters, 5th edition. So, what I'm going to do is tell you what the most important things are for AP World students taking a look at these two chapters. If you're taking a regular world history class or a college world history class, I would really encourage you to read the Oceania sections too. In fact, I'd like, my AP World kids, if you have time, you should check that out. It's really interesting. There is not Oceania content on the AP history exam anymore. So know that. But you could always, like directly, meaning there won't be a multiple choice question on it, but you could always use it as an example, like anything that happened in the past, but is not in the, specific course and exam description. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at what is happening here. I'll move myself onto the slide. In chapter 6, there's one section on the Maya. It's a subsection entitled Heirs to the Olmec. So there's a little thing on the Olmec, which are even more ancient than the Mayas. Giant stone heads, maize agriculture, a lot of cool stuff. And the Maya came after that. And the Maya continued some of the Olmec traditions, including maize agriculture. So maize is often called corn in American English, but in British English, corn is any kind of grain. So we use maize here to be more specific in world history. The Maya also produced some amazing achievements that you might know about in math and astronomy, which combined together led to the calendar. And they did have writing, which was very expressive. So those things are all significant, and they go into the, this kind of post-classical time period. And then in chapter 20, when you learn about the Aztecs conquered areas that were still culturally Maya and incorporated a lot of those elements into Aztec or Mexica culture, Mexican culture. In fact, it's important to know that there are Maya people alive speaking Maya-related languages continuing these traditions right now. Okay? Maya religion is also interesting on its own and influenced later Mexica or Aztec traditions. You might not believe what that illustration in the bottom middle is of until you read the caption and the description. So I'm just going to consider that a teaser. So check out the Maya section there. It's page 111 in the 5th edition. Okay. This focus now here is for chapter 20. And it brings together, it talks about the Mexica or Aztec as heirs to the Mayas, and then brings in the Inca civilization in Andean South America. Andean. So sometimes this culture is called Andean. As you can see, the Incas here, their empire stretched all throughout this huge area, a lot of which was in the Andes Mountains, but not all. It went all the way down to the coast. Technically, the Inca were the ruling elite, so most people who lived in this area were not Inca, but during the time of the Inca Empire, they were ruled by the Inca. So that's what makes it an empire. It's like that. The broader term for those cultures, without just referring specifically to the ruling elite, is Andean, like as in from the Andes. Okay. Oceania is also covered in chapter 6, and that's the area in the Pacific Ocean, including Australia and New Zealand, actually included there. And there is a lot of great history there that I encourage you to check out. Or if you miss it, it's like, pour one out from Moana, I guess. But the Ongoing Austronesian migration throughout the Pacific Islands is one of the main topics here in Chapter 20, kind of how and the effects of that. So we have our three big themes for this time period, and you can see all of them. Exchange networks is going to mean like the diffusion of cultural ideas. Oop, I got my head there on that double-hulled canoe. There we go. And so there's going to be, blood rituals as part of religious ceremonies. It's going to be something that, continues. That's a continuity in Mesoamerica. It is also an area of diffusion where that culture spread to other areas. The Aztecs ran an empire based on tribute, meaning they did not directly control the area that was considered part of their empire, but local states in the empire had to provide tribute in the form of valuable goods like bird feathers to like pretty ones, big ones. Like you could make paintings out of these things. The stuff is super cool. There'll be more of that when we get to chapter 24. But this tribute then led to a kind of exchange. So there'll be like these double-headed turquoise serpent, which was made of turquoise from far north of the Aztec capital in what's today the southwestern United States, plus sea items like oyster shells and conch shells from the Gulf of Mexico. So that tribute system is going to lead to the movement of goods. Also, cotton cloth. Cotton, one of the species of cotton is indigenous to the Americas, and so there was cotton cloth that was one of the goods that tributary peoples supplied to the Aztec Empire and emperors. Okay. In the Andes, we have the Inca sun god built on prior traditions and then diffused to other places. Many cultures in world history have had, a worship or a veneration of the sun, and here we have a sun god. Again, like with the Aztecs, the rulers organized exchange of materials throughout the area. And the Inca rulers adopted some of the foods that were part of the Andean cultures before they got there. And we'll talk more about those later, but especially the potato. Okay. In Oceania, the migrants brought with them plants and animals. These migrations then again led to the diffusion of biological material, which you'll see here, using these amazing double-hulled canoes. That was the migration technology. Increased productivity will be part of this as well. So in Mesoamerica, that's going to be the very productive maize plant. If you think of a corn, domesticated corn is very different than its wild relative, but that domestication process led to a very productive plant. Like you put one corn kernel in the ground and get a lot, on the corn cob. Beans and squash also provide nutrition, and I should add are delicious. Chinampas is a key term here, and there's a slide just with them in there. So pay attention to that and be sure you know that's an excellent illustrative example of increased agricultural production. The Incas also domesticated plants and animals, or used them, in particular the potato, which is nutritious and delicious. The potato provides lots of nutrients and a lot of calories. It's a lot of carbs for a modern day person, but if you're moving only by foot at 10,000 feet, you have less carbohydrate worries than, say, me sitting in front of my computer all this time. So we have that. In terms of agricultural techniques, terracing up in the mountains and irrigation near the coast were both key techniques. You'll see there for Polynesia, the Austronesian migrants in Polynesia, which would include Hawaii, Tahiti, they brought lots of foods with them, including the taro root, the base of the Hawaiian dish poi. So here's a chinampa, and you can pause and take a look at this slide if you would like and see what is happening here. Sometimes they're called floating gardens, but they weren't always floating. The garden beds here could have been on a raft that was floating in, swamp or pond, shallow water, or it could be an island that was built up by humans. But either way, there's soil from the bottom of the wetland that's, scooped up and placed on the garden bed. And so that is nutrient dense. The plants love it. That's important because corn is a very hungry plant. You don't get all those kernels for free. The maize plant sucks up nutrients. Here in the Midwest, where I'm broadcasting from, farmers take fertilizer that's derived from natural gas and they inject it into the ground to get the plants the maize plants all the nutrients they need. But back in the day, that wasn't available, so chinampas did the trick. Very productive agriculture. So you see these pyramids, you see these, warrior elites, corns at the base of that. Okay. Finally, we have here in terms of state forms, as I've already alluded to which I've already alluded, something like that. The Aztec and Inca empires were both built on conquest. So we have people who came from somewhere else and then spread their rule over a larger area. And then they financed what they were doing, their empire through by forcing tribute. In the case of the Incas, especially, that meant coercing labor from the peoples they had conquered. And then with that surplus labor and goods, constructed public works, including temples, which were meant to provide, spiritual well-being for the people and also ensure things like good harvests and military victory. And then in the Inca case, built very useful items like roads and bridges and things that connected the empire. So these are imperial state forms, although they took different forms. The Aztecs being a tributary empire, where they're not directly controlling places, whereas with the Inca Empire, there is more direct control, and they're coercing labor as a way to build things that connect the empire together. So you can pay attention to those. With the Mayans that are earlier, there's not a Mayan empire, the way we use that term to mean one nation conquering another nation and ruling it. The Mayans were organized into city-states. So this would be an area of change in Mesoamerica, a change from city-states to an imperial form. Well, there's continuity there too if you pay close attention. But for our purposes, we can think of the Aztecs as an empire and Mayas as having city-states. So that is about it. I'll link the slides here, or you can look at these terms. These are 3 short videos that are also available for you to watch that really bring home some of the amazing things with the Incas. And these are like 3-4 minute long videos. And I'll link the slides underneath, and then you can check them out there. All right. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy the section on the Americas and Oceania. And don't view them as worlds apart so much as worlds together with themselves. All right. Good stuff. Bye-bye.